There are roughly 50,000 orcas on Earth. We have called them all the same species for 150 years. That is almost certainly wrong. So in 2020, off the coast of Spain, boats started getting attacked. Not capsized by waves, not hit by debris, attacked by orcas. A pod of them would approach a sailboat from behind, slam into the rudder repeatedly, sometimes for over an hour, until it snapped clean off. By 2023, it had happened over 500 times. Several boats sank completely. The headlines all said the same thing. Orcas are getting revenge. Killer whales are rising up. One whale in particular, a female nicknamed Gladys, supposedly injured by a boat, became the face of an underwater uprising. It's a great story. It's also probably wrong, or at least not the full picture. And the reason it's not the full picture is the same reason almost everything else we think we know about orcas right now is being quietly rewritten. Because somewhere in the last 2 years, while everyone was watching the boat attacks, marine biologists were independently building a case for something much bigger. That the animal we've been calling the orca, one species, one behavior set, one personality, might not actually exist. There might be several, and they might be less like animals with instincts and more like nations with traditions. 3 things happened in the last 2 years that almost nobody has connected. NOAA, the U.S. federal agency that decides what counts as a separate species, has proposed splitting the orca into multiple species for the first time in over a century. 2 male orcas in South Africa have quietly rewritten the ocean's food chain using a technique no orca was documented using before them. And a critically endangered pod of 15 individuals off Spain is doing something that started with one animal and spread to the rest. And nobody fully understands why. The same answer sits underneath all 3, but to see it, you have to look at them together. For about 150 years, every orca on Earth has belonged to a single species, Orcinus orca. One name, one entry in the textbook. Doesn't matter if it's hunting seals off Antarctica or salmon off Alaska. Same species, just a very widespread one. In 2024, NOAA, the U.S. agency responsible for, among other things, deciding what counts as a distinct species, proposed changing that. Specifically, they looked at 2 populations living in the exact same waters off the Pacific Northwest, the ones scientists call residents and the ones they call Big's killer whales, named after the researcher who first told them apart. Same ocean, often the same week, the same stretch of coastline, and according to the proposal, different enough to be reclassified as entirely separate species. Here's what's actually different between them. Residents eat fish, almost exclusively salmon. Big's orcas eat marine mammals, seals, sea lions, sometimes other whales. That alone isn't unheard of in nature. Diet varies, but it goes further. They don't interbreed. Genetic studies show these 2 groups have been reproductively separate for tens of thousands of years. They're about as distinct from each other, genetically, as some classic textbook examples of separate species in other animals. They don't socialize. When a pod of residents and a pod of Big's orcas cross paths, they don't ignore each other and they don't fight. They actively avoid each other. Researchers have documented residents going quiet, stopping their calls entirely when Big's orcas are detected nearby. And they don't sound the same. Each group has its own dialect of clicks and calls, distinct enough that researchers can identify which population they're listening to purely from audio, with no visual confirmation at all. So you have 2 populations, same species technically for over a century. Different diet, different language, different social rules, genetically separated for tens of thousands of years, and they actively avoid each other when they meet. At what point does different population become different species? NOAA's answer, as of their 2024 proposal, now, right now. And once you accept that Orca might not be one thing, the rest of this gets a lot stranger and a lot more interesting. Orca hunting techniques are not instinct. They are taught, deliberately, patiently, across generations, the same way a skill gets passed down in any group with enough intelligence to do it. That single fact changes almost everything else about this animal. Watch this. That's an orca off the coast of Argentina, deliberately riding a wave onto a beach, grabbing a sea lion pup, and then using the next wave to pull itself back into the water before it strands. This is an extremely risky move. Orcas have died doing this, misjudged the wave, ended up beached for real, and suffocated under their own weight. It is not a safe hunting technique, and it's not something every orca knows how to do. It's taught. Specifically, in this population, mothers deliberately strand themselves in shallow water with their calves nearby and let the calves practice the technique on them, repeatedly over years, before the calves ever attempted on real prey. Researchers have watched this teaching process happen across multiple generations, in the same families, in the same stretch of coastline, for decades. Now go to the other side of the planet. Different population, different ocean, different prey, a seal resting on an ice floe instead of a beach. But the same basic idea. A group of orcas swims in formation directly at the floe, creating a wave that washes over it and knocks the seal into the water, where the rest of the pod is waiting. This technique has a name in the research literature. It's called wave washing. And it is, as far as anyone can tell, completely independent of the beach hunting technique in Argentina. Different population, different prey, different physics, but the same underlying principle. Use the water itself as the weapon and coordinate as a group to do it. Here's the part that I think doesn't get said often enough. Neither of these techniques is something an orca is born knowing. A calf born into the Argentine population and raised, hypothetically, by the Antarctic population would never spontaneously invent beach hunting. It would learn wave washing instead, because that's what its family does, and that's what it would be taught. That's not instinct. Instinct doesn't need a training curriculum spanning years. What we're actually looking at is something closer to tradition. Regional knowledge, developed once, somewhere, by some pod, and then passed down deliberately, patiently, because it works. Different populations of the same general animal, living differently, eating differently, teaching their young differently, sounding different when they talk to each other. I'll let you sit with that phrase for a second. When they talk to each other. Because the next part of this story is about a pair of orcas who didn't just develop a new hunting technique. They worked out how to hunt one of the only animals in the ocean that, until recently, nothing hunted at all. Gansby, South Africa, used to be one of the best places on Earth to see great white sharks. Cage diving operations built entire businesses around the guaranteed presence of great whites in these waters. Starting around 2017, two male orcas, known to researchers by the nicknames Port and Starboard, named for their collapsed dorsal fins which lean in opposite directions, began appearing along this coastline. And great white sharks started washing up dead. Not bitten, not fought over, opened. In several of the carcasses examined by marine biologist Alison Towner and her team, the wounds were almost surgical. A precise incision behind the pectoral fin and the liver removed. Just the liver. In some cases, nothing else was eaten at all. Why the liver specifically? Because a great white shark's liver is enormous. It can make up a quarter of the animal's body weight, and it's packed with energy-dense oil. For an orca, it's the equivalent of going for the most calorie-dense organ available and ignoring the rest, the marine biology version of eating only the best cut. Here's the part that actually changed the ecosystem. Great white sharks didn't fight back. They didn't even wait around to find out what would happen. Tagging data showed that within days of port and starboard's documented presence in an area, great whites would leave and not come back for months. Some individual sharks that had used Gansbai's waters for years were tracked moving hundreds of kilometers away and simply not returning to their usual range. An animal widely considered the ocean's apex predator, 3 meters of cartilage, muscle, and 300 teeth, with no natural predators of its own for the entirety of its evolutionary history, looked at 2 orcas and left the neighborhood. For an animal whose entire evolutionary strategy for the last 16 million years has not required a flee response, that's not a small behavioral shift. That's a complete rewrite of what the top of the food chain means in that ecosystem, triggered by 2 individuals. 2, and this is where it gets stranger. Port and starboard aren't the only orcas doing this anymore. Similar liver predation events, great whites found dead with surgically removed livers, have now been documented in other locations along the South African coast, sometimes involving different individual orcas entirely, which raises the question that, for me, ties this whole story together. Did other orcas learn this from port and starboard? Did the technique spread, the way wave washing spread through one population, the way beach hunting spread through another? We don't know yet. Nobody does, but if the pattern holds, if hunting techniques in orcas spread the way they appear to everywhere else we've looked, then what we might be watching right now in real time is a new tradition being invented and taught, the same way beach hunting was invented and taught in Argentina at some point in the past that nobody was around to record. We just happened to be around for this one, which brings us back to the boats. The population ramming sailboats in the Strait of Gibraltar is a subpopulation of Iberian orcas, critically endangered, with an estimated total population of around 15 individuals. 15. That's the entire group responsible for hundreds of documented incidents. The revenge narrative, that a traumatized orca named Gladys is leading an uprising, is compelling, and it's the version that went viral. But most of the researchers actually studying this population are more cautious. There's no confirmed evidence that any specific injury event caused this. What there is evidence of is that the behavior started with a small number of individuals and spread to others in the same population over a relatively short period. Sound familiar? I'm not saying the boat attacks and the shark hunting are the same thing or driven by the same cause. They're not, and we genuinely don't know what's driving the Gibraltar behavior. It could be play. It could be a response to a specific incident we don't have footage of. It could be something closer to what researchers studying primates call a behavioral fad. Something that starts as one individual's idiosyncratic habit and gets picked up by others through observation, the same mechanism by which a hunting technique gets picked up. What I am saying is that every single piece of this story, the species split, the regional hunting traditions, the spreading shark hunting technique, and now a 15-member pod that somehow turned rudder ramming into a multi-year, multi-individual pattern, points at the same underlying thing. These aren't 15 animals doing the same instinctive thing 15 times. They're 15 individuals in a tight-knit group who appear to have developed and are actively spreading among themselves something new. Something nobody taught them from outside. Something we are watching get invented. So where does that leave the orca? 150 years ago, it was one species, doing one set of things, everywhere on Earth. Now we've got a proposal to split it into at least 2 species in the Pacific alone. And that's almost certainly not the end of it, because the same genetic and behavioral gaps that justified that split exist between other populations too. Populations nobody's formally proposed splitting yet. We've got regional hunting traditions taught across generations, different enough between regions that an orca from one population would have to learn an entirely new skill set to survive in another's territory. We've got a hunting technique against one of the ocean's most established predators that may be less than a decade old and might currently be spreading from animal to animal, the same way information spreads through any group that talks to each other and watches what works. And we've got a small, endangered population doing something with boats that nobody fully understands yet, that started with 1 or 2 individuals and didn't stay that way. I keep coming back to the same thought. We didn't find this stuff by going somewhere new. The orcas off Gansby, the orcas off Gibraltar, the orcas in the Pacific Northwest. These are some of the most studied marine mammals on the planet, in some of the most monitored coastal waters on Earth. And we're still catching new behaviors as they happen, still revising what we thought a species even means for this animal. Still watching, this year, a small group of 15 individuals potentially write a new chapter in how their population behaves. One that researchers are documenting as it unfolds, not reconstructing afterward. The textbook Orca, one species, one behavior, one personality, was never real. It was just the version we hadn't looked closely enough to disprove yet. What's actually out there is a set of distinct populations, with distinct languages, distinct traditions, and at least one of them currently in the middle of inventing something new. And here is what we do not know. We don't know whether the Gibraltar behavior will spread further or disappear in a generation. We don't know how many separate orca populations will eventually get their own species designation. The proposal covers 2, but the same logic applies to populations from Antarctica to Norway. We don't know whether port and starboard taught other orcas, or whether the same idea was independently reinvented. Science doesn't pretend otherwise. The orca we described today is the best reconstruction the current evidence will carry, and it will be revised the moment the next piece of data arrives. That is not a problem with the science. That is what the science is for. We're not done finding out what that something is. This channel covers exactly this kind of story, things that are still being figured out, from an ocean that keeps surprising us. Every couple of weeks, a new one. If you want to be there for the next one, subscribe. It genuinely helps.